back from Brothers from Inglewood podcast. I'm Hoopy, your host. We're here with Frank Boyd, dear friend of mine, who has, so eloquently began to share in our last segment some things that he experienced and what he's doing now. And so I just want to say thanks again to the Coolest Group. Thank you, Shoot Off the Line, Clothing Apparel, for what you're doing with our young girls and women and clothing the world through tremendous fashion and different designs. We want to say thank you for allowing us to partner along with you. I'm excited to be back in the studio to share once again a very, very interesting interview with a dear friend of mine, Frank Boyd, who's going to give us some insight as to some of the things that he's been involved in and where he is now. Frank, let me just ask you this really quick. You came out of probation into a community that had an enormous need, right? So you served in the capacity of a probation officer. I don't know the exact level. You can share with the people what your status was when you worked as a probation officer. And now that you have completed this particular area of your life, what was it like coming out of it, and where are you now?
Basically, I served 27 years as a deputy probation officer, one, and I eventually worked in some different capacities. I sustained an injury in probation, and so they put me in as a court officer. And
Okay.
what a court officer is that in every criminal proceedings or case, you have a court officer, which is a person who is a representative of the department,
Okay.
and he's basically a liaison between the courts and the probation officer. So my job was to sit there and to listen to the proceedings, and then there's information the judge gives certain conditions of probations or whatever, and because of pre-plea reports need to be written or certain reports need to be written, there's a minute order. It's a long sheet of paper that's produced, and my job is to make sure that all 5,000 probation officers get their minute orders from there. So I would take them,
Wow.
and I would make sure that I got the accurate wording from the judge, and put that stuff, and either make a phone call or have file those things in a case, find out who was the PO of record, and make sure that those documents went out to the proper people. So when we had either a progress report or a pre-plea report or whatever you need, any type of report that was due to the judge, that probation officer knew that report had to be submitted. And every day when I would get to work, I would file it out and then be able to submit it to the judge. I worked there. I think I worked as a court officer probably about like 6 years.
Okay.
And in that capacity, actually, because I wasn't an official court officer, but they have you acting in that capacity. So
Okay.
while I was in that stage, what are they going to do with me?
I got you.
They had me function in that capacity, which was a good thing because
Okay.
I learned so much about the department, and then I really started to see how the system worked.
Wow.
If you're just locked into detention like I was for all those years, I never found out how the administration and all the policies, I was going to meetings, finding out that the chiefs were saying stuff like, we don't want kids who were coming from state schools. And I mean, you really started to see the systemic influence that upper administration had.
You started to see how the engine runs.
And became really well aware of what was going on.
Okay.
Well, before I had actually physically retired, because I filed for a medical retirement because they did not want to accommodate me in that capacity. So that my doctor said, hey, either you give this guy this, and this, or we're going to retire him. So that went through a retirement board. Took about 2 years. So for that 2 years, they still had me going to work, temporary accommodations, and I was doing that. Well, I had this lady friend that I had a casual relationship with that became intimate. what we
Okay.
would say. And she got herself into some legal trouble, got some allegations of fraud. And the police came out to me one day. They came to my house, about 20 DA investigators banging on my door and saying, hey, man, you're being accused of as a matter of fact, I wasn't a suspect at all at that time.
Okay.
They came out and told me that they knew that I had some dealings and affiliation with a female who was committing fraud.
Okay.
And the fact that I was in law enforcement, a sworn peace officer, that number one, I shouldn't have dealings with people like that.
Okay.
And if I didn't know, then I would be willing to come forward and
talk
tell her,
to
because
them.
she had victimized me. What happened, she had basically earned $1.6 million in my name. And basically what happened, she and I had purchased some property together, and we also had a bank account together. And so the fact
Wow.
that we had those things going on, I was
It
connected
looked
to
like
her.
you
It
were
looked
connected.
and we were doing this on a business level.
Okay.
I trusted her because I knew that I was about to retire, and so she gave me some alternatives to your retirement.
To your retirement, yeah.
And then she said, well, we'll do a daycare together. You'll teach the kids
An
karate.
income stream.
So I mean, and I trusted her because I had been knowing her for so
Yeah.
long, and
Yeah.
I didn't think. Well, anyway, there was some fraud. There was some allegations of fraud. Not allegation, but there was some fraud going on that got revealed. So when the police came and asked me about it, I was
You didn't know.
totally in the dark about it.
Okay.
And so I was operating foolishly.
Okay.
Because of trust. Because of
You were
trust.
involved with her, so emotions were there,
Yeah.
your feelings, and okay.
So and that's what basically happened. I mean, when I look back on it, even the judge said, "How could you be so stupid?" He said that what I see before me, the professional that you are,
Right.
that the man that you are, how could you
Sworn peace officer,
Yeah.
you know better.
Yeah, you know
You're
better.
You're trained to look further into
Yeah.
a lot of situations that you're involved. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it.
You're-
So he was basically stressing your accountability.
accountability, that you're held to a higher standard
Yeah.
because you are a sworn peace officer and a
Right.
decorated. You graduated summa cum laude from college. I mean, I had a lot of things that were favorable in their eyes, and they like, nah, man, there's no way that you should be allowed to be involved in this. So anyway, because I knew, I'll take it back to the guy who basically made the allegation. And he basically told me, he said that we know where you came from, the South Central community, and it's like you're holding on to your street cred because you don't want to be labeled as a snitch. So we need you to tell that this girl has been victimizing you, because my tax man calls me and tells me that there's $180,000 worth of income that where did you get it from? And it's shocker to me because I didn't know.
You didn't even know.
But when he
because
told,
she was handling all of this stuff behind your back,
Yeah.
in your name, because she was using you as a pawn.
yeah.
For whatever scheme she was in. Okay, I got you.
And it wasn't just me. There were a whole bunch of other people that she did like that,
Yeah.
and they came out, so they knew that I was a victim anyway, because I made them do their research. And being honest with you, Hoopy, I just was, because of where I came from, I was always taught to be a snitch,
Yeah.
and even though I was a sworn peace officer, it was hard for me.
Because your core, who you are, Frank Boyd as a person, that was everything against who you are.
I mean, I couldn't even walk into the guys that I walked to being a snitch. They say snitches get stitches.
And they did when we were coming along. It meant something.
Like that. Yeah.
It ain't like that anymore. And I ain't condoning that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even want to talk about the ones that do snitch, because that's not of our fabric.
Yeah.
We're not cut from that cloth.
And they knew that, and so he basically pushed that issue on me. And so what happened, because I didn't snitch, that called for the department to invest millions of dollars in an investigation. And so then they told her, well, basically, I don't know what actually happened, but what eventually happened is I came up facing charges myself.
Oh, yeah.
So I came up facing charges, and when they told, I'm like, man, I wasn't worried about it at all, because I knew that there was nothing. If you didn't do anything, and so anyway, they told me that she signed over 300 and something documents, and they said that I gave her permission. And that one permission, the fact that I granted her permission, was a blanket statement to sign 300 documents. You got 300 documents. my signature is not on one, but you convict me for perjury and fraud. And that was just because
That's because you wouldn't tell. That was the district DA or the assistant district DA saying, we're going to stick it to him because he won't help us.
Absolutely. And that's what happened. That's how they play.
A sworn police officer with an impeccable record who's already started his process of retirement, which was in a span of 2 years that it was on its way, and his word means nothing.
Nothing. And then you got a guy, a white guy, that got up there and made these false accusations against me, and it was all my appointed. What do you call it? He's a court-appointed counsel, because you can't have a public defender if you're in law enforcement. So they wanted me. There was no need for me to go out and pay the money, because when they incarcerated me, my bail was $420,000. So I had to come up with $42,000 cash. So where was the rest of the money to go for me to go buy this high-powered attorney? Especially if I knew I didn't do anything. If I knew that I had done something, I would have had the money, a high-powered attorney. So, and they told me that I was facing 30 years, but the deal they offered me was 1 year, which would have been, because you're only doing 33% in the county, I would have served like 90-something, 120 days in the county. So I knew, and my attorneys, my court-appointed counsel says, they don't have any evidence against you. So anyway, as we went through, and I thought that the case was looking good on my part, the jury looked at me as a cop. And the fact that they looked at me as a cop and they were mad at cops at that time in society, I didn't stand a chance. They figured that, hey man, he's a cop.
Jury of your peers.
Jury of my peers. But they weren't law enforcement officers. They were standard citizens, and they were mad at cops. And so here I am. I got a cop turning against me, and I got the jury thinking that, because how we view the moral,
the stigma,
the
stigma,
and that's what happens. Well, anyway, I end up getting convicted in court. Took it to trial, mind you, going up against 30 years, and they offered me 1 year as a deal. So that lets you know, why would I risk 30? I'm 51 at the time. So if by the time 30 years, I wasn't even guaranteed to come out alive. So why would I risk 30 years after living as a peace officer with all the privileges that came with me being as a peace officer, and risk that for 30 years? So anyway, I got convicted, end up the most dreaded thing in my life, end up going to prison. And I always wanted to know what prison was like. I'd always interview people, talk to people, talk to my clients, and I can tell you, Hoopy, that what I experienced at prison, there was no accurate description of what you heard
until you went.
Now,
what level of incarceration did they subject you to?
Okay, because I was a peace officer. When I went to L.A. County, they put you in what's called
protective custody.
They changed it now. It was called special needs yard, and it was special needs. But I was in a peace officer dorm. So, but eventually, when you go to prison, they changed protective custody to special needs yard. But because I was a peace officer, they said they put me in high power, where they I looked like Hannibal Lecter. They had they would chain you up all the time. So when I eventually went, we were in a peace officer dorm when I was in the county. Okay. But when I went to prison, they put me on a level 4 yard, because they figured that
with the murderers, with the lifers. Look, the guys with the high points. The lifers. The lifers usually on level 4.
I was in there with guys that was doing 300, 2 lives, triple lives, and because they said that nobody would know you, so we're gonna put you there, as opposed to putting you with the other people.
Somebody always have action at finding out your paperwork. Man, that's the system.
Man, I knew people that knew that I had been arrested. It has calling me from the penitentiary, already looking out for me to come, because they knew, and so they thought they could put. So I actually served on level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1, and then to the special needs yard. They moved all and
moved you around.
It was because it was a liability
Okay.
because I tried to sign off and say I don't need protective custody.
I got you.
And even though some of my homeboys were saying, well, man, because you were a peace officer,
You might
I think
wanna,
you, but
yeah,
because
just to protect yourself.
because they saying that there's
Because some dudes, they
hate
just ain't
cops.
gonna let it go. They're not gonna let it go.
Yeah, and the bad thing about it was when I went into level 3, I ran into guys who were actually on my caseload as probationers, and they was, what you doing here? But because I had treated them like human beings, it was never an issue.
Okay,
They
gotcha,
were all. I
gotcha.
never did let the power of my badge or
Yeah.
or the gun or anything rule me. So I had it. I had more problems with the dudes on the special needs yard because of the kind of people that was on the special needs yard.
Just bad people.
Bad people, man.
Poor character.
Rapists, child molesters, guys who won't be accepted on the main
General
yard.
Pop, yeah.
On GP, yeah, those were the guys that, man, it was special needs. It's rough.
So now that you're transitioning from a professional
Law enforcement officer.
decorated career, you're a college grad, you're from a 2-parent home. You got a lot of balance to your life, Frank. You got a lot to offer, and then you got a lot at stake, right? Now that you have the time, you got to serve it. How much time did you actually serve, and what was that time like, bro? I mean, I know Frank as this charismatic, wonderful personality, competitive athlete, friendly giant, and ladies man.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this well-balanced professional. Now you're thrusted into incarceration, bro. You're around the worst of the worst. How long did you do, and what was that time like?
Man, I actually served 22 months. And the $42,000 bail, because they dragged the case on for 3 years, and my attorney was all for me dragging the case out because they have a saying that says justice delayed is justice denied. Okay. So just like we saw in the George Floyd case, when the verdict comes back quickly, it's usually guilty. Yeah. So he felt, my attorney felt that if you let this case drag out, they just kept postponing it, just abusing the taxpayers' dollars, having me come in, make an appearance, and then putting it off 3 or 4 months. And so anyway, to answer your question directly, I served 22 months. 22 months behind bars. Wow. And what was that time like? My daughter was waiting for me to come home and when I got remanded from court. So, my son graduated from college while I was incarcerated. Guys who were in there who I ran into guys who I hadn't seen, the last time I saw this person was 19 and I was 51, and they had spent their time behind bars and mine had been on the street. So that, and every day was a long day. It was like, I honestly can say that time behind bars every day is like 3 days. Because
you had
slowly.
and you had so much that you left.
Yeah.
You walked away from. You have these young people who counting on you. Mm-hmm. You have a vibrant life, and you had privilege. You had a lot of opportunities. Yeah. Now you have no more privilege.
No.
You're on the other side of what you governed.
Yeah.
At one time. No, for a long time.
Yeah,
27 years.
27 years.
You're on the other side. You're on the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you remained being frank because you treated people fairly even when you were in law enforcement.
And that's why I didn't have any problems, man. I was a martial arts instructor. I had the whole city of Carson basically teaching them Kempo karate, and then I was teaching a seniors class. I had a seniors program Monday through Friday in the morning, had people from 50 to 83 years old. They were counting on me. They looked forward to me coming in. I was coaching basketball at Harvard Community College and also El Camino Community College. I was doing a lot of things, being a lot and very active in the church, doing stuff. So when my daughter waiting on me, we had class that night to just be snatched out of society like that. And one thing I learned from martial arts is to be accountable for your actions. If I would have done it, it wouldn't have been so hard. And I had a lot of guys that would come up to me because I spent a lot of time by myself, and they would say, hey, man, you know what? You just got to forget about the outside world. But they don't understand that I had been doing the outside world for 51 years. I couldn't just take this and say, they start talking to me about what the big word in prison is program. You got to learn how to program. That means that you have to, from every hour, it's like schedule yourself. Well, I used to make the schedule for dudes, so I understand about programming, but being incarcerated, it was hard for me to say, I didn't look at what God was doing in my life, that was his plan for me to reach out and to learn what those guys went through so I can continue to help guys. I got a brother that will have done 33 years, went to prison at 15, and so now we have a different conversation now because he says, my brother knows what it's like. He didn't want to talk to me about what it was like, but now I know about the strip searches. I know about the victimization. I know about the how guys extort other guys and
the injustice, the attitude, just the emotional aspect of them trying to exploit weakness.
Yeah, man. Oh, it's bad. It's way worse. I had this thing. I had spoken to some guys before, and I told them that I think the devil would think that prison is bad. That's how bad it is in there. I mean, and people that they try to make it seem like, because we brothers, we can learn to get along. But the way the system, they don't look at you. That's why in society now that, as a man, you would taught to look another man in the eye. Everybody uses their peripheral vision, and being tough.
Nobody trusts. There's no trust factor. No one can be trusted.
Yeah, no one. I mean, and there were so many rules in there that we won't talk about because a lot of guys, I don't want to go out because guys wouldn't tell me, and I was their probation officer, so I guess it's an unwritten rule that there are certain things that you don't talk about. But I could say that we're all reduced to the level of inhumane in prison. I
always had that perception.
Man,
that's just inhumane.
They treat you like a dog. The food they treat you, and even though you can learn to make your own food and stuff, I'm talking about the county issue. I'm talking about the state issue. Foul, man. There's no way that the only way people know how bad it is when they get family members. And then there was the cold thing about it is because the same probation officer that when people found out that I was a probation officer, because they learn your jacket, they were coming to me with their cases, and I was, because of my knowledge, my in-depth knowledge of how the system works, I was able to look at their paperwork and say, man, this kid was really railroaded. There were guys that were born in 2000, and the way the attorneys tricked them, to take this deal, man, I didn't do anything. They didn't have a reason to lie to me. Yeah. And I know because everybody say everybody in jail is innocent. That's not true.
That's not
dudes tell you, man, you know what? I took the plea bill because I knew I did it and they had the evidence. So there are a lot of guys that are taking responsibility for their, but then there are a lot of guys, young guys, where the system is just, man, it's a business.
Yeah.
It really is. Almost
$100,000
a year to house an inmate.
Yeah.